Wie heißt du?
Heidi.
After spending 5 years confined to her Aunt Diet's home without the freedom to leave, a young orphan girl named Heidi is escorted to the Swiss Alps to reside with her grandfather. Diet, having secured employment in Frankfurt, is unable to take Heidi along, disregarding warnings from neighbors about her grandfather's perceived unsociability and potential danger. During their journey up the mountain, Heidi sheds her boots and dress to revel in the liberty of her undergarments, prioritizing movement over fashion. Upon their arrival, Heidi's grandfather, Alpold, reacts with anger and promptly ejects them, expressing his unwillingness to care for the girl. Although Diet feigns departure with Heidi, she actually abandons her behind the house before fleeing herself. Alpold notices and chastises Diet, but Heidi, refusing to be a burden, asserts her independence. With Alpold adamant about rejecting Heidi, she resorts to sleeping in the barn with the goats. The next morning, Alpold provides Heidi with goat milk for breakfast and escorts her to church, where the priest deems her healthy. Despite the priest's urging for Alpold to assume responsibility for Heidi, the stubborn grandfather remains resolute. The priest then announces his plan to take Heidi to Mainfeld in 3 days to seek alternative arrangements. Upon returning home, Heidi contemplates her sleeping arrangements, prompting Alpold to grant her freedom to choose. With limited furnishings, Heidi discovers an attic filled with hay and claims it as her bedroom. Despite expressing her desire to stay, Heidi receives no definitive response from Alpold. The following day, Gothard Peter visits to collect Alpold's goats, affording Heidi the opportunity to accompany him and immerse herself in mountain life. Enjoying the outdoors and goat herding, Heidi strikes a deal with Peter to cease goat abuse in exchange for sharing her food. However, Peter warns Heidi against revealing this arrangement to Alpold due to rumors of his past. Upon returning home, Heidi's behavior hints at her knowledge of these rumors, prompting Alpold to challenge her to trust her own judgment. Heidi chooses to embrace her observations and affectionately embraces her grandfather before retiring to the attic. Over time, Heidi forms a strong bond with Peter and undergoes a physical transformation for comfort. Despite the community's insistence on Heidi's education, Alpold refuses due to winter isolation. As boredom sets in, Alpold attempts to lift Heidi's spirits with homemade carvings and a makeshift sleigh, fostering joyful moments together. He then facilitates a visit to Peter's home, where Heidi encounters his family's struggles, including his deceased father and elderly blind grandmother. Peter struggles academically and questions the relevance of learning to read since it doesn't align with his life as a Gothard. Despite his reluctance, his mother insists he continues his studies. Meanwhile, Heidi finds contentment living with her grandfather, Alpold, over the years. When Diet returns, suggesting a better life for Heidi with her employers, emphasizing the opportunity for friendship and education, Alpold firmly rejects the offer, highlighting Diet's sudden concern for Heidi's well-being. Undeterred, Diet persists in her efforts, pretending to leave while secretly searching for Heidi among the goats. When Heidi chooses to stay with Alpold, Diet manipulates her emotions, falsely claiming Alpold's desire for her to leave. Distraught, Heidi agrees to accompany Diet, observed by Peter. Alarmed by Heidi's absence, Alpold rushes to find her but arrives too late as Diet has already departed with Heidi, leading to ridicule from neighbors. In Frankfurt, Heidi is introduced to the Seisman household, encountering the stern governess, Rottenmeier, who disapproves of Heidi's rustic demeanor. Despite initial challenges, Heidi befriends Clara, who is wheelchair-bound. The girls bond quickly, with Clara covering for Heidi's mistakes to protect her from Rottenmeier's scrutiny. Heidi undergoes a transformation to adapt to her new environment, receiving instruction in manners and academics alongside Clara. Despite her adjustments, Heidi remains true to her roots, yearning for nature and exhibiting her eccentricities. Through their friendship, Clara confides in Heidi about her struggles and loneliness. One day, Heidi expresses her longing for the mountains, learning from Sebastian that seeing them requires access to the city tower. Afterwards, Heidi takes Clara on a clandestine excursion outside the confines of the mansion, revealing the city's sights to her friend who rarely ventures beyond its walls. Despite their efforts to glimpse the mountains from the city tower, disappointment ensues as the view falls short of expectations. Clara's spirits lift when she encounters a vendor selling kittens, prompting her to purchase the entire litter. Upon returning home, the girls are met with panic from Rottenmeier, who mobilizes the staff to search for them. Sebastian locates them, but Clara manages to conceal the kittens just in time. However, upon their return, Rottenmeier's attempt at scolding is thwarted by her sudden allergic reaction to the cats, leading to a comical scene that lightens the atmosphere. As punishment, Heidi is banished to the corner during dinner, with Rottenmeier threatening worse consequences in the future. Witnessing Clara's tears and distress deeply affects Heidi, exacerbating her own nightmares and Clara's withdrawal. Tinette blames Heidi for Clara's illness, intensifying Heidi's guilt. Seeking to reassure Clara, Heidi visits her once she's deemed well enough by the doctor, promising her departure isn't rooted in animosity. Despite understanding, Clara expresses her reluctance for Heidi to leave, as she has become her closest companion. With Heidi's presence, Clara gradually resumes her activities and attends classes, though Heidi's struggles with reading persist. When Clara's father, Mr. Seisman, returns home accompanied by grandmother Seisman, Clara joyfully reunites with her family. Mr. Seisman praises the positive impact Heidi has had on Clara's well-being, despite Rottenmeier's attempts to discredit Heidi's progress. However, grandmother Seisman decides to verify Heidi's progress firsthand rather than rely on Rottenmeier's assessment. During bedtime, grandmother Seisman initiates a story but insists Heidi takes over, revealing Heidi's inability to read due to Peter's discouragement. Grandmother Seisman encourages Heidi not to blindly accept others' judgments and offers support for her learning endeavors. Motivated by her love for stories, Heidi commits to practicing reading more diligently. The following day, grandmother Seisman commends Heidi's potential and acknowledges her discomfort in their formal household. Despite Mr. Seisman's reluctance to let Heidi go, grandmother Seisman suggests his attachment stems from assuaging his guilt for neglecting Clara. Mysterious nightly disturbances further unsettle the household, fueling speculation of ghosts among the servants. Although Mr. Seisman remains skeptical, Heidi diligently practices reading with the book provided by grandmother Seisman, eventually mastering the entire story. The teacher takes credit for Heidi's progress, prompting Mr. Seisman to decide Heidi should stay permanently, much to Clara's delight but Heidi's inner turmoil. One evening, after grandmother Seisman's departure, Mr. Seisman and the doctor confront the nocturnal disturbances, only to discover Heidi sleepwalking. Concerned for her well-being, they find her freezing and discover her secret stash of bread rolls. When Heidi awakens in discomfort, the doctor diagnoses her with severe homesickness and recommends returning her home due to her fragile mental state. Initially resistant, Mr. Seisman grapples with the decision to send Heidi home, reflecting on his late wife's fate throughout the night. The following morning, he candidly explains to Clara that the ghost was Heidi sleepwalking due to her suffering, leading to the decision to return her to Alpui's care. Clara reacts with intense distress, expressing her frustration towards Heidi before retreating to her room. While Heidi finds solace in the prospect of returning to Alpui, she remains concerned for Clara's well-being, although her attempts to reach out are rebuffed. As Heidi prepares to depart, the servants assemble a basket of provisions for her journey, and she entrusts Mr. Seisman with a wooden bird to convey to Clara, extracting a promise of future visits. Upon Heidi's departure, Rottenmeier anticipates tranquility returning to the household, but her hopes are dashed when a kitten, named Heidi by Tinette, remains. Back in town, Heidi eagerly sheds her formal attire and reunites with Peter before making her way up the mountain to her grandfather's home. Resuming her former lifestyle, Heidi spends her days tending to the goats with Peter, with the addition of attending school during the winter months in town. Despite facing strict discipline and ridicule for her aspirations of becoming a writer, Heidi excels academically, unlike Peter, who continues to struggle with reading. Heidi diligently chronicles her experiences in letters to Clara, expressing her longing for her friend's presence and urging her to visit. Moved by Heidi's letter, Clara experiences remorse for not bidding farewell, prompting grandmother Seisman to organize a visit to the mountain with a group of servants. As the girls joyously reunite, grandmother Seisman shares a drink with Alpol, proposing that Clara stay for a few days and offering payment. Alpol graciously accepts but refuses payment, considering Clara a guest. Now it's Heidi's turn to acquaint her friend with mountain life. Clara embraces simpler attire, dining without extravagance, petting goats, sleeping on hay, and witnessing a shooting star. The girls spend all their time together, provoking jealousy in Peter. Refusing Heidi's invitations, Peter herds goats alone, resentful that Clara's wheelchair prevents her from joining them. One morning, Peter, consumed by jealousy, discovers Clara's wheelchair outside and impulsively pushes it off a cliff before fleeing with the goats. Alpol deduces Peter's involvement and carries Clara on his back, leading Heidi and Clara on a goatherding expedition. Witnessing the mountain's splendor, Clara attempts to capture a butterfly, inadvertently standing up. Although walking remains challenging, Clara practices with Heidi and Peter's support, prompting a change of heart in Peter. When grandmother Seisman retrieves Clara, her son initially protests, but Clara's newfound mobility swiftly changes his tune. After tearful farewells, grandmother Seisman gifts Heidi a notebook and pen, encouraging her to pursue her passion for storytelling. Heidi bids Clara farewell with a promise to write, returning to her routine with Peter, now accompanied by her cherished notebook. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for more future videos.